green stalk that grew from my lima bean.
Hey, cats and kittens, and welcome to another episode of The Debrief. I am your host, Brianna Joy Gray, and it has been all together too long. I've missed you guys. I told myself I could have a little bit of a break, and by a break, I meant I was going to quit one of my 3 gigs, and this was the one. But you know, I've told you this before, and it is entirely true. Ooh, am I muted on YouTube? You guys, can you guys on YouTube tell me if I'm actually muted or if people are just messing with me? But, you know, this was, in fact, my favorite and the thing that makes me feel most moored and makes me have a sense of whether I'm going in the right direction or if, you know, what I'm talking about is useful. And there's been some pretty big action-packed episodes on the bad faith front lately. We obviously today just talked to Chris Hedges. Before that, it was Jamu Baraka, and before that, it was Cornel West. The topic of 2024 obviously is front of mind with the announcement of Cornel West's candidacy. And you can hear, I saw some of you say on Patreon in the comments, and this was like the most optimistic you've ever heard Chris Hedges sound, which is hilarious and I think sort of true. For better or for worse, I think with the options that are now presented in the 2024 space, people are feeling engaged in a way that I couldn't have anticipated, frankly, before this. It's also been really wild times on the internet ever since Robbie and I interviewed RFK Jr. last Friday. If you haven't watched that interview in full, it's over at Rising. It was posted in full, I think, this past Monday after we put out clips on Friday and over the weekend. And I would recommend watching it beginning to end, including, obviously not the most important thing, but him answering a question about whether or not he is a Trekkie. And of course, we got into the aliens news, which has been top of mind for some reason and really gripping public attention in a way that I find to be kind of fun. We actually had a really great guest on Rising today who is a Harvard scientist who studies, well, I think he generally speaking is an astronomer, but he's currently in a boat, I think off the coast of South America, where an object, I should say, an interstellar object struck the ocean back in 2014, and they're using a giant magnet dredging along the bottom of the ocean to collect these spherical alloys, which he thinks there's some indication that they could potentially be life elsewhere that made them. He thinks it's potentially some kind of probe. So he showed us around his ship and showed us the materials that he was using to do this investigation. Everyone wants to talk about aliens. Everyone wants to talk about the bottom of the ocean. That was the story that combined both. Of course, the Ocean News is the group of 5 men who were declared officially lost today in the ad hoc home engineered ship that was used to go and allow some very wealthy individuals to go look at the ruins of the Titanic. That story, for some reason, has really captured, myself included, it's not judgment, has really captured the public attention for a lot of reasons. I'd love to know how you feel about that for those who are new. This is a call-in show. You can call in and ask questions, get in the queue if you go over to the call-in app and follow the show called The Debrief. I will take your questions there. Normally, I do not live stream it, but I've been trying to experiment to see if I can get double bang for my buck and see if I can get some YouTube engagement up. So if you don't already subscribe to Bad Faith YouTube, please do. Please feel free to help out independent media by clicking the like button on this video and others that you might have had a glimpse of. And if you want to listen to the full episode with Jamu Baraka and any of our full Premium Monday episodes, you can go to patreon.com/badfaithpodcast and subscribe. I see the queue is queuing. Lysol, you're up first. Let me know what's on your mind.
Free.
How you doing?
Doing good. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Let me turn you up a little bit if I can.
So the folks on Callin have been dying to know if this absence had anything to do with contract negotiations.
Contract negotiations for what?
with Callin since he got bought by Rumble. That's the main theory.
Oh no, so that is related. So I had a talk with the Callin people, and they are basically wanting, I think, if not all of their shows and some of the shows, to consider moving over to locals. I am not entirely sure if I want to commit to that. Locals is largely video. It's more of a video platform than Callin is, and part of the appeal of Callin is to be able to do it without all of this preparation and cameras and lighting and stuff that I've propped up here today. I don't know. What do you think? What should I do?
Well, it's the type of rumor that is kind of like festered in your absence. The only person, I think they said Aaron Mate is completely stopped using Callin, and that's the theory why he doesn't use it. Savvy said she was getting paid something like $25 or $50 an episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's what they want. They want us to move over to Callin. I think the app entirely is going to go. Well, I shouldn't say that. I was under the impression that it was going to go away, and that if not locals, then we're going to have to figure out another place to go, which is another reason that I'm interested in simulcasting it. Yeah, I don't know. It is related to the change, but it also just happened to correspond with me needing a little bit of time. So I'd be interested to know what the community thinks. My understanding is that Locals is a subscriber service, and I'm a little bit meh about, creating something else that someone, that you guys have to pay money to use. Although I was told that you could do like the first part of the episode free, and then the second half would be behind a paywall. I don't know. It just felt like a lot. And I just haven't thought about it very much since I had the call with the Locals people, or with the Callin people maybe a couple of weeks ago.
I was wondering, would you consider Twitter Spaces at all? I feel like the only thing Callin has that doesn't is a chat function.
Potentially. I think that the issue with Twitter is that there's so many people on there. It will be different. There are a lot of people who are going to be not necessarily the best faith of actors that I think will start to engage. I don't know if you've seen what my Twitter timeline has looked like over the last 24 or 48 hours or so, but I think we'll have to contend with people who are like not a part of the community that we've built here, and it might change the dynamic somewhat, but I'm open to trying it.
Yeah, it's funny in the so Callin has grown on me to the point where I watch one of your episodes, but I don't feel like I've finished watching it until I talk to people on Callin about it. So it's kind of like we've been hosting. I've been calling it the BJG Pushback Society.
You guys have been doing some call-ins on here on your own shows.
Yeah, and me and a guy Terry, we debated COVID on, I think it was Tuesday, had a nice long 3-hour debate.
Any resolutions?
No.
Well, that sounds like par for the course. That sounds about right.
Yeah, we were able to find common cause in believing that long COVID's real, and I think we really made a point in kind of like long COVID and vaccines, they're both people being left behind by the government, and they deserve somebody to stand up for them.
Yeah, it is confusing to me that there exists a cohort of people who I think is reasonably skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry and what they're being told on that front, and also reasonably skeptical of government agencies and what they're telling you on that front, but are not at all skeptical of the possibility that government agencies might be downplaying long COVID risks when it would also fall upon the government ostensibly just to provide some medical care for folks who are injured. So, you got to look at the incentives on all sides if you're going to have that kind of skepticism, and ask yourself whether or not you're playing into a narrative that absolves the responsibility of the government of any responsibility for not having health care for people who might have long-term consequences of the pandemic that they've declared is over.
Yeah, especially since the side effects of both being vaccinated and long COVID are incredibly similar. There's just a lot of overlap in those communities, I feel.
Yeah, I wish there were more solidarity between them. I wish there were. But I was talking to a friend actually who's a significant vaccine skeptic, but all but says that long COVID doesn't exist. And I was like, how can you think this way? I just don't get how you can hold those things in your brain at the same time, but it happens.
Yeah, that was also they're like, oh, Vinay Prasad should debate RFK. I'm like, that's like Tucker debating Kennedy. Like, they have differences on things?
I don't know that that's true, actually. Vinay just wrote a whole piece breaking down where he thought RFK Jr. was right and wrong. He did a episode about it a while back, a few weeks back, maybe a month or so back, where a lot of Vinay Prasad's audience got very upset with him because he disagreed with RFK Jr. about vaccines at several points. So I don't, I think he broadly credits the problems with heavy metals in our environment that RFK Jr. points out, but pushes back very strongly against concerns about childhood vaccines, especially now that mercury is no longer in them, and there just isn't evidence to suggest that there's any connection, any correlation, or whether there's any science behind a causal mechanism.
I mean, for my money, I'm trying to get a hold of Novavax because it actually has preventative elements that help with it. It helps prevent against infection versus just severe disease, and it's shown to be pretty versatile across different variants.
I'm not sure if I know what Novavax is.
It's the nasal one. It's not an mRNA vaccine. You inhale it, I guess, through your nose. That some people have found benefits from it, but of course, the government won't authorize more shots for folks. So I'm not necessarily on the mRNA train anymore. Trying to get some of that new stuff.
All right. Well, let us know how it goes, Lysol. It's really nice to hear from you.
For sure. Oh, real quick, there's one issue I wanted to get your opinion on. It was a couple weeks ago. Do you think that Baby Gronk rizzed up Livy and now he's the drip king, or is Livy using him with platform?
What are those words? What are those words?
You don't? Okay. Bless you. You're another millennial. My partner just ignored me for a day because I kept saying those words. So Baby Gronk is like a 2-year-old pro athlete, and Livy is a LSU gymnast with a nice ass, and the drip king is a football player who wears makeup. And his last post said, "I'm not the drip king. The real drip king is G."
Okay.
Okay. So rizzing is using charisma. It's one of my favorite short.
I know what Riz is.
Yeah, so that was a sentence, and the fact that it was just like none of those words made sense to millennials made me kind of gleeful. So I kept saying it over and over.
All right. Well, I'll have to look into that, Liza. Thanks for calling in.
Yeah, for sure. Keep the faith.
Keep the faith. For those who don't know, I do one from the front of the line, one randomly selected from elsewhere. So if you're in the back, sit tight. I'm going to go to Grace next. But before I hear from you, Grace, I'm going to read this comment on the screen. Love the show. Hope you listen to some Celine Dion today. I haven't, but maybe that is a good idea. All right, Grace, what's on your mind? Long time no chat.
Hey, I'm so excited that you're back. I've been thinking about your Cop City episode. And I've been waiting for Callin just for it. But I wanted to just thank you so much, first of all, for covering that topic.
Yeah. It was a pleasure. The whole strategy of having a show sometimes feels like you're trying to figure out how to get people to take their vegetables. And it's a bit of a spoonful of sugar strategy. And it does feel like when you do a heavier episode like that, and one that isn't as punchy or talking about, election season or what is Trump doing or something like that, it can get a little lost in the weeds. So I was so personally glad to have that particular panel come together as quickly as it did. I care a lot about that particular issue. I see the ratcheting up of criminal penalties and the use of domestic terrorism laws to throw the book at folks as something that portends, I don't know, it's overused, but fascism. It feels as though the more obvious it is that there's no political off-ramp from the problems, whether it's the climate, whether it's mass incarceration, whatever, the larger the gap gets between what majorities of people want and what Congress is willing to do, the more people are going to turn to protest activism and crimes against property. And they know that, and that is why they're making it basically terrorist. It's a federal crime. You're potentially going to spend the rest of your life in jail for doing things that are even like protected speech actions, like flyering, leafletting mailboxes, or even attending a concert, as what happened in Atlanta. So.
Yeah, and I think their week of action is coming up.
It's next week, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll be very curious to see what comes out of that. And I think they just announced that they have 2 months to do a ballot referendum on it. but I'm wondering if that will stop. If that will stop it, because I watched more than this 15 hours of public comment when they held them there all night. I just got sucked in and was like, yeah, feeling all of the full spectrum of emotion and like cheering everyone on from afar. But it's just it's one of those examples where you're like, it's so clear that there is no say from the people whatsoever.
Yeah.
They're very clearly against the whole entire project, and I feel like it's something that the whole country needs to know about, because one, police departments all around the country are going to be, trained there, and two, they're going to start using the same exact tactics. I mean, we have like smaller scale, and it's not domestic terrorism, but in Asheville, there's where I live, there's felony littering charges, and we just had 45 press freedom organizations that spoken out against, like, journalists were charged for doing their jobs here. Once you start to take away, kind of all of the civil rights are being pulled back, especially around the First Amendment, and I think that's probably the new tactic. I agree about the overuse of the word fascism, but if this is not fascism, what is? And the irony that it's like, it's also not, it's not just Republicans.
Right.
Everyone gets all ramped up about that.
Right.
So yeah, I really hope that you keep following up on that too, because I look up, CNN is based in it. Right? They're not even covering.
Yeah, unsurprising. Yeah, I haven't heard, apart from following so many of the Cop City activists, I probably wouldn't see it as much on my timeline. I do see Marianne Williamson talking about it and tweeting about it, and I have seen in the past, Cornel West, I brought it up in the episode. But other than that, yeah, it's hard for me to tell because I don't watch cable on a regular basis, but I haven't seen much about it more broadly as well. So.
Yeah, I've been specifically, I don't watch that either, but I just wanted to see, like, whenever there's a story that I'm interested in, I'll see what the mainstream coverage is of it. There was like, I think the Daily did an episode on it a while back. But yeah, it's been definitely like pretty blacked out by the media when it's such a huge story. And, I think we're all sitting here 3 years after the uprising, and that the audacity that they'd be like, you said give police more training here,
Yeah.
It's so wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate that. And also I'm definitely excited to see what Cornell brings to the table in this. I think that's the only way that anybody's going to be able to, if people are still even into electoral politics, I think, this, separating yourself from the two-party system is going to be kind of the only way to build trust with people who keep seeing the same thing happen over and over again with the exact same result.
Yeah. Yeah, I am hearing that loud and clear. I appreciate hearing from you, Grace.
Yeah, thanks. Have a good day.
You too. Keep the faith. I'm going to you next, Chris. I'm going to read off the screen. Someone, Carpe Diem, says Cornel West, Matthew Ho, 2024. Thank you for your comment, Carpe Diem. Chris, what's on your mind?
Hey, what's up? Long time no talk.
I know. How have you been?
I've been good. I've been, working. I've been outside, as the young people call it. I had a couple vacations, so I'm kind of like settling back. I got another one coming up next month, so that's good. I'm going to Puerto Rico.
Oh, wait a minute. You just had 2 vacations, and now you're going on a third next month?
Yeah, next month.
You're just having a hot girl summer. What's happening?
What? That was like 2 years ago. So I don't think it's hot girl summer. It's outside.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Isn't talking about it as outside also like a pandemic-y 2 year ago, 2020 kind of a way of thinking about things?
Well, it's a little different because we really couldn't be outside. So even though people were outside, it was very, now it's like, from the government and everyone's saying it's cool to be outside. So now it's kind of like you're kind of making up for those 2 years you were like locked down. So I guess that's kind of like the theme. Like, I'm outside.
Okay. Well, I'm happy for you, Chris. So what's going on with you? What's in your mind?
I wanted to talk about RFK and Cornel West. With RFK, I think the more he talks on my end, the less interesting he seems. Like to me, he seems like a standard Democrat with a, I guess that has like a anti-corporate message, I guess.
What specifically? What things have you said that have upset you specifically?
One in particular was his comments on Medicare for All, and I think he's kind of like flip-flopping because I think he's starting to realize he's not where I think the left or like people who are supporting, so the people on the left who are supporting him want him to be. Mm-hmm. So I remember when he did the breaking point thing and Crystal asked him about it. At first he was kind of like, when she asked about Medicare for All, he was just like, well, no, I support a free market and I don't really got a problem with insurance. And then I think when he got to you guys and you talked about it, it was more so, well, I think the best option would be the public option, which then can transition to two-way Medicare for All. And it's like, that sounds cool though, but like there's a lot of problems. I remember AOC was on the Breakfast Club kind of talking about it a little bit about like how it probably would be better to just do Medicare for All as opposed to the public option, because what the insurance companies would do was basically kick all their old and barely sickly people off and then put them on to the public option, kick them off their insurance. So they would have to go that, which would make it more expensive. And his whole goal was to, I think, try to make it only 8% of people's income. I think that's what he said on your guys' thing. I think.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to pull up the clip now if I can find it, because I do think, people have their thoughts and feelings about his positions on vaccines, and it takes up a lot of space. But one of my main goals in that interview was to do what I think Crystal also did, was to get him on the record on some of the left priorities. And there's some real irony with some, not you, of course, but some leftists who are like, oh, how dare you talk to RFK Jr. and it's so bad and RFK Jr. But it's like, I teed it up for you. Like, to the extent that you want to make the criticism that he's not really a leftist, here's all of this material for you to get into. And there's, I don't know, a surprising lack of interest, I think, in some of that. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, that's kind of what that's one of the things that kind of like threw me off. I mean, obviously his stance on Israel, which is very weird, and I think honestly, I think it's he's full of shit on that one. Like that comment he made about like how I think I forgot what podcast he was on, but he was saying that Israel, when they kill Palestinians and Palestinian children, it's not on purpose. I'm like, come on, you can't do that. You can't do that. I'm sorry. That just sound like the Israel and AIPAC kind of started getting to him, and I'm pretty sure people in his camp were probably talking was like, hey, you gotta clean this up because they are a force. And then the one thing they can do, especially with him, because he's a white male, I think it's easier for them to slab the anti-Semitism on him, even though if he did just have like a standard kind of like. I would say, more so like a leftist position is more so it's just like, Israel is not, they're not innocent in all this at all. So it's like, and you should be able to speak about the abuses that Israel are committing on the Palestinians without you being labeled an anti-Semite. But of course, that's kind of the weapon that happens with that.
Yeah. I think that is, we talked about that at length. So the only reason I didn't belabor that point with Chris Hedges and why I'm not going to belabor it here is because we did talk about it for about half of the Cornel West interview. But I do agree with you there. I was going to try just to play a quick clip of this moment about Medicare for All in the debate if I can. Let me know if this sounds okay.
And the kind of energies that we want to release in our children.
No. To that point specifically, Mr. Kennedy, when you're talking about barriers on creativity and entrepreneurship, et cetera, healthcare is repeatedly raised by business owners, et cetera, as one of the largest costs they have.
Okay. All right.
I try. Oh, wait. This is why.
And they start a new business. And of course, Medicare for All was such an animating force of the last two Bernie campaigns and really galvanized a lot of
previous non-voters and disgruntled Democrats into a movement. You said in a recent interview that you were for Medicare for all in theory, but that you found it, I believe it was something along the lines of politically unlikely, something to that effect. I don't mean to put words in your mouth. But it strikes me that some of the other things that you've been fighting for, I think, really valiantly, like cutting the military budget, taking on the military-industrial complex, are also things which will face intense pushback from the blob, from these deeply entrenched, very well-funded industries. And that being said, given the obstacles to fighting the military-industrial complex, what do you say to progressives who are disappointed that you don't seem to have that same urgency with respect to healthcare, which is repeatedly ranked as such a significant concern for Americans, and Medicare for all in particular, which 88% of Democratic voters support?
Yeah, well, let me answer both, all of your questions. One is, just from a practical standpoint, Brianna, in terms of cutting the military budget, it's easier for a president to do than passing a national health care program. And a lot of those costs that the president can do on his own without that much cooperation from Congress. And that's why I think of course you're challenging vested interests that are as powerful as the pharmaceutical industry and the medical cartels. But it's an easier thing. The president does not need to get 51 senators and 250 congressmen on board. And then with Medicare, look, I watched my uncle and fought with him for 50 years trying to get national health care through. And I'm very conscious of the deadlock that he reached. And I am, if it were up to me, I would say we should have Medicare for all right now. The current way of funding Medicare is not worth, or funding healthcare in our country is dysfunctional. What I would advocate is a public option, which will lead ultimately into Medicare for all, but give people individual choice. I'm somebody who is for personal freedom, for personal choice, and I think the public option is more consistent with that belief. And if we can make a public option that, for example, would charge a maximum of 8% of people's income rather than the 20% that they're paying today. If we can make that option work, and if we can make it attractive to Americans, you will naturally evolve it into Medicare for all. But you'll do it through a process of choice and evolution rather than imposing it on people with a lot of hostility, which is just practically impossible to do, as you probably understand. As I understand, because I was involved in the healthcare battle for so long.
Well, can you speak specifically to what you think?
I think we need to think. We have to acknowledge these deadlocks, acknowledge these practical obstacles, and we have to think in terms of ways to unify Americans in ways that will reduce the overall cost of healthcare. The healthcare costs now in this country of $4.3 trillion. That is far higher per capita than any other country on earth. We pay much more than anybody, double or triple what people pay per capita in Europe or Canada, and our healthcare outcomes are 79th in the world. We're behind Mongolia, we're behind Cuba, we're behind Costa Rica in healthcare outcomes. And one of the reasons for that, probably the principal reason, in fact, the principal reason is chronic disease epidemic. We have the highest burden of chronic disease of any nation in the world. Why is that? Why can't we eliminate it? We know that it comes from environmental exposures. Why aren't we doing the science to identify what those exposures are and to eliminate them? That will eliminate a huge chunk of our healthcare costs and give us a lot more elasticity and flexibility in the way that we allocate those costs to different actors within the system, which is really what you're doing when you switch from HMOs to Medicare for all.
Yeah, Mr. Kennedy, I do. So yeah. I mean, for one, my understanding is preserving private insurance puts the seeds of Medicare for all destruction into the mix. And it basically puts you in a place where you're not disempowering the middlemen, the private health insurers, and the pharmaceutical industry sufficiently to make it stick. And moreover, you are diminishing the pool that you need to actually bring down costs. That was my understanding of it from the Bernie campaign. And moreover, while I think it's perfectly fine and good, actually, to want to pay more attention, I know he's an environmental lawyer, to the presence of heavy metals and other toxins in our atmosphere, in our environment and atmosphere that may be contributing to chronic illness and the like. That's not a substitute for the financial problem that is the high cost of health insurance. You're not going to make everybody that's sick healthy tomorrow. So the question is, what do you do about the moral issue that in the richest country in the history of the world, we have something called medical bankruptcy because we put a price tag on your ability to stay alive. And if you're poor, you are less likely to be able to get interventions simply because you don't have as much money and a right to live, apparently, as somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that's like a huge thing with me and with everything. So like his explanation as to like why, I guess, is to, if let's just say he gets in a world, he gets elected and everything like that. Obviously he has to deal with Congress, he has to deal with all the things he's going to have to. So if the public option is the only way that could be seen fit, I guess I can I can kind of stomach that a little bit. But it's kind of like raising the points that you're talking about. It's just like, are you really dealing with the private insurance? And I know that I'm pretty sure it was a Breakfast Club interview with AOC, and one of the things she said was that private insurance would kick their more sickly people off, and obviously they would go to the public option because that's the only healthcare that would take them on. It would then increase costs because obviously sickly people and older people have more medical costs than younger fit people, which may bring back the idea of a mandate. You got a mandate. It wasn't that the whole thing with the ACA.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so and that was the huge reason for why the public option wasn't the best course of options, is because if you don't set any laws or anything that's like geared towards like what private insurance will do, because obviously they're going to want to save some money on the thing, so of course they have no problem kind of like kicking like older people or people who are a little bit more sick. And then I also think about I'm just thinking about this now, but like I have insurance through my employer, but it fucking sucks. I'm not a sickly person or anything like that at all. But if I could save myself maybe the extra $300 that gets taken out of my check for that kind of stuff, then shit, that gives me just a little bit more wiggle room to move. Now, obviously, with taxes and everything, it'll probably increase, or it wouldn't necessarily be. I wouldn't get that like $300 back, but it still would be like, I think it would be a little bit more feasible. So that's just kind of like my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that, Chris.
All right. One last question. It doesn't have to be Cornell, because I'm pretty sure someone's going to ask about Cornell. But what is up with like liberals and their like their whole shtick of they don't feel as though they need to argue their points anymore, and people should just accept what they believe?
Okay, what are you specifically thinking about when you ask that question, Chris?
So I'm asking specifically like everything that's been going on with RK and as far as like the anti-vax and debate and things like that. Like that kind of thing, and this whole thing on Twitter about like everything that happened with Joe Rogan was like, to me, it was really weird, but it also kind of, it seems like to me that they're not confident in their points and everything that they make. So they talk as though like, oh, we're right, we got science on our side, this and this person's stupid and that. It's like someone's calling you to task. It's like, why would I debate this person? Why does scientists need to? I'm like, wait. Like, so like, is this person an idiot and a cop and a kook and everything like that? And you're the smartest person in the world, or are you just kind of scared? And I guess what happened with like protests and shit like that, it was kind of like, I think everything he's done, like, I don't mean to call him out his name, but it's kind of pussy. Especially considering
Chris,
Utah.
I don't mean to call him out of his name, but that motherfucker, everything but this child of God.
It's pussy. I'm sorry. It's like he started to smoke. It'd have been completely different if it'd have been completely different if he wasn't on Joe Rogan podcast. He didn't comment on the specific Joe Rogan podcast where he was interviewing RFK, saying that this is crazy, this is stupid, and everything like that. And then when the dude was like, okay, well, how about we set this up and let's just hash this out? Yeah. And then it's like, then you ran like, so okay, then you got scared, or maybe he didn't get scared, but maybe he just felt as though he didn't need to do that. Yeah. But then right after that challenge, you go to Mehdi Hassan, you go to CNN, you go to all your little boys that back you up, put you a battery in the back, so, hey, you don't need to debate this guy. This guy's cool. This guy's whack. You're smart. You put your little lab coat on just to really show that you're a scientist, which is fucking weird and another thing in general. And trust me, I do get the dude pulling up to his house and everything like that. Like, that's just weird. And that was so unnecessary and ridiculous. But it feels like, at what point do you guys actually believe in what the fuck you're saying? Because I don't think there's any downside to debating RFK. unless you feel as though you can lose, or
so
confident in, or maybe you just can't speak as eloquently, and you're not a politician, so you're a little bit more. You're not, I guess, like as far as like a debate and everything, like things like personality, things like zings and zigs and stuff like that. I guess maybe that kind of accounts for stuff, but like I don't know.
So I know people feel very strongly about this, but I'm of the Nathan Robinson school of you should debate people, but you should be prepared. So I'm not saying that people should walk in when there's an important subject like this one is. I'm not saying you should just expose yourself to public humiliation, but I do think that you should debate and be prepared. Now, if what Dr. Hotez is saying is that he feels so unable to respond to RFK Jr. in a persuasive and informed way, that under no circumstances, without any amount of preparation, despite him having all of the expertise in the world and RFK Jr. not being professionally trained in this field, he is unable to respond to his points, then at very least, I think that he should recommend another scientist who can, and that debate should happen. I think there are other ways you could do this. You could do written responses and stuff like that, but it's not going to get as much reach as going on the most popular media show in all of humanity, or at least in the English language media, and going ahead and debating Joe Rogan. I think that you're right that it comes off as being unable to respond because you don't actually have an argument. And I think that what's really going on that most people aren't acknowledging is that when you're not face to face, you can mischaracterize your opponent and also decline to engage with the more difficult points. So I have no doubt that RFK Jr. regularly overstates the risks of vaccines according to what science has proven, right? Regularly, in a way that might lead some people dangerously to forego vaccines that have saved millions of lives and kept kids across the country from dying of meningitis or polio or whatever the heck it is.
Yeah, and that's the danger.
But it's also the case that when Mehdi Hasan has Dr. Hotez on, and Mehdi Hasan sets the question up as, all right, so we've got a noted anti-vaxxer who's now claiming he needs to debate you on Joe Rogan's show. It's like, okay, if you listen to RFK Jr. and you hear him say, I'm vaccinated, my kids are vaccinated, there's benefits to vaccines, but I have concerns about the mercury that was in these vaccines, and now that it's gone, I have concerns about aluminum, and I have concerns about these other things in our environment, and I have concerns about the flu vaccines that are given to pregnant women that have mercury in them, right? I hear that, and I may or may not agree with some of that, but I'm not hearing anti-vaxxer, right? Like I'm hearing someone who just said, I believe in vaccines, I have them, but here are my concerns. So immediately, anything that Mehdi Hasan and Dr. Hotez has to say is like no credibility whatsoever. And if they were in the same room, I think that they would either mediate their language a little bit, or if they didn't, they would get immediate pushback, right? The same way that when Dr. Sanjay Gupta went on to Joe Rogan, and they were in the same room, suddenly it became, well, maybe ivermectin or what have you isn't shown to help very much, but no, you're right. It's not literally a horse dewormer, and you aren't literally a crazy animal medicine eater, and people were wrong to characterize you that way, right? And you get a middle ground that's somewhere closer to the truth than what either side is really saying in their most hyperbolic moments.
Yeah, and I think the middle ground is the part that scares everybody, because the part that RFK may be right on is the things that really get to his overall message of corruption and the capture of our political party. So the things, like more metal being in the water and everything like that. Yeah, they don't want to really, because then what does policy have? And then if a scientist acknowledges something like that, then it could lead people to go, well, why is there so much plastic in the water, or so much metal in everything like that in our water and our food supplies and things like that?
Yeah,
that's the big thing that I think, which is the middle ground. So
and this is what was so crazy. Like when I was engaging in this on the internet, what was wild to me, it's like here I am sitting fully vaccinated. Like I made it to adulthood. I got my mandatory childhood vaccines, and And if I was heading home on the train, I traveled last weekend, and I saw everybody talking about the RFK Jr. interview, and I was like, well, you know what? He did say some stuff that I honestly wasn't prepared to respond to. Let me Google up on some of these vaccine claims. And so I'm reading, I found out a couple of things, and on the 3-hour trade ride back from Philly, I'm like, okay, here's what I discovered so far. And I tweeted some stuff out. Most of which was saying he's wrong about vaccines, right? I was like, well, the China vaccines don't have mercury in them, so I don't know why he's still talking about mercury. Somehow, those statements got me labeled as an anti-vaxxer.
Yeah.
Me literally explaining to folks why they should not be concerned about taking childhood vaccines got me described as an anti-vaxxer. Me pointing out that there is scientific research, peer-reviewed papers that indicate there may be some benefit in taking vitamin D to ward off the worst effects of getting COVID, hospitalization, et cetera, death, et cetera. Is a bunch of people saying, well, that's anti-vax. This is only anti-vax if you think someone's saying take vitamin D instead of getting a vaccine, which no one's saying. I'm certainly not saying it. Maybe somebody else is saying it, but I'm not saying it. Yeah. So you get these people who are so siloed and so triggered. Oh my God, these libs are so triggerable that if you even sound like someone who sounds like someone who's saying something that they don't like, they're willing to deny that there are pollutants in the atmosphere, pollutants in the water, pollutants anywhere, because to them they're hearing, well, if she says there's pollutants, that means we shouldn't take a vax. They're unwilling to acknowledge the health benefits of taking vitamins, because, oh my God, she's saying if vitamin D is good for you because it supports immune health, then she's saying you don't have to get vaccinated. They sound ridiculous.
Yes, this is what I'm talking about. This is kind of the synopsis of what I'm saying, is they feel as though they don't have to debate or have conversations, and then they just deny things just because it gives credence to something they don't like. So now it's anti-vax. Anti-vax is the big thing. Before then, when it was Ukraine, you're a Putin's puppet. You're this, you're that, and it's just like it's a constant thing. They look to dismiss something as opposed to just debate it or just address it full on with their arguments and with their talking points, and they look so disingenuous. Like I said, when they're saying things like, "Oh, there's not pollutants in the water." Well, pollutants in the water isn't a cause for autism or anything. And then this other thing that came up where it was just like, "Oh, well, what's wrong with people with autism?" I'm like, why are you even bringing that to the fucking conversation?
That was so wild.
That was weird. That's weird.
It was so weird. And then there was a weird joke, maybe death threat. Let's hope it was a joke, because Elon Musk doesn't care about banning anything other than people saying the word cis. And then there was that weird guy I met once who popped out of nowhere and expected me to remember him, and also remember that he was getting a PhD in something germane to this subject matter. I mean, holy smokes, has it been a weird 24 hours. Oy vey.
Hey, I pray for your mind, body, soul. I know because it's people intentionally trying to misrepresent what you say. But that's all I got to say. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I'm glad you're seeing it, because otherwise I would feel crazy as a bed bug.
All right, Bray.
All right. Nice talking to you as always, Chris. Let me read a couple of these comments. I've been neglecting the YouTube. Neoliberal Tears, my friend, thank you. Love you, bestie. Rising has been so fire this week. It's an environmental hazard. LOL. Axia Studio says, love the show. Hope you, I read that one already, my bad. Listen to Celine Dion today. K-Dot says, who's this stranger? Why is she on my YouTube feed? I thought I left you on Callin. No, LOL. It's a simulcast, K-Dot. I'm sure you figured that out by now. Chris Beeson, good job talking Medicare for All with RFK Jr. Thank you for that, Chris. And another one from Chris saying, agreed, Bree, when you hear RFK Jr., you don't hear anti-vaxxer. Yeah, again, I wish the scientists would weigh in, because I'm sure there's more that's wrong that I can't even identify. But instead of just saying it, they say things like, well, he's wrong. Don't debate him. And I'm like, okay, Can you help me understand why? And they're like, what, you're just asking questions? That's what the Nazis said. And I'm like, oh, okay. You're literally at me that I'm not a scientist so that I don't understand. And I'm like, yes, I'm not a scientist, so help me understand. Explain it to me. No, it's not my job to explain it to you. What do I look like? I'm like,
there are plenty of research papers that tell you are wrong. You have no right, even though you have a show and you have a podcast, you have no right to answer questions. You're supposed to just sit and listen to what the fuck we say.
It's crazy. But one statistician, I was literally I had read this thing. I wasn't clear about this one statistical thing, and I tweeted what's going on here, and somebody tagged this guy in, and he answered. I was literally composing a DM to him to ask if he was willing to come on the show and help me understand something. When he started tweeting, Brianna Gray is a dumb idiot moron who does, I was like, whoa, what? So to the extent that like I've been reaching out to people, and it's legitimately difficult to get the liberal, quote unquote, on the good side of things, guys to come, or women to come on the show, because they've decided out of hand that you're a bad faith actor and they don't need to explain themselves. Okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to put my history science degree to work and read some papers myself, and you don't get to complain about non-experts controlling the conversation if you and Hotez, I'm sorry, I almost called this man Hotez, and everybody else refuse to debate. Refuse to have a conversation. I don't need to debate someone on my show. I just want to ask. I literally want to understand.
I think we could kind of see that you were just trying to understand, and you were putting things out there, and you were clearly saying where you think our care. Like, I literally saw a fucking post where a guy was like, God, I didn't know Bree was an anti-vaxxer. And then in the comment that you had, you literally quote, I don't think vaccine but like it's just like geez, like, and then like I mean he got ratio because it was like, so you're just not going to read past the part that you didn't like and also it's like after COVID and everything that happened with the government and everything like that, I don't think people realize that you gave more air and more steam to anti-vaxxers or the anti-vax movement because of the response to COVID.
Yeah.
So yes, you have to start talking about this. You can't just keep doing the same thing you did during COVID because people are pissed off and people were lied to. Or there were a lot of definitives that were made. So you have to engage with this. The liberals' willingness to not engage with it, I just don't get it. I don't know.
I don't get it either. If it's not Hotez, I hope I'm confident that one very credentialed virologist in all of America has the rhetorical skills and the chutzpah to step up to the plate. America needs you, Dr. X. Show yourself.
We need. All right, bye, Chris.
Bye, Chris. All right, I'm going to read off the screen. James Staub, thank you. Please do the Betty impression again. Maybe in a bit. We'll see. We'll see if I'm so inspired. Chris was from the front of the line, I believe, so I'm going to hop around again. Rika, what is on your mind tonight?
Oh my God! Yay! Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh my God! I was working, and then all of a sudden I saw the debrief is going live, and I was like, fuck this shit. I'm going to bed. And I'll wait. It's been too long.
I know.
Missed the debrief so much.
I've missed you too. What have you been up to? What's on your mind?
Well, I feel like there's been just so much content. So much juicy, good shit that's been happening from Bad Faith to what you've been doing on Rising. So I just have to first start off. I'm so happy about Cornel West running on the Green Party. It just provided me some like relief. I'm like, good, I know who I'm voting for. Thank God. Thank fucking God. You know, because I was like really, really struggling here, and also just like give people discursively like another option, you know, to just like mentally be like, okay, we have another way. There's another path. It's a longer path, whatever, but we can choose this path, and that's fine. I feel a ton of relief, and I'm glad that you interviewed Chris Hedges, and I'm glad to see that he is supporting Cornel in this. I'm curious, like one of my questions for you, at least related to this topic, was what is like one comms advice you would give Cornel? Because I feel like I think he's a good orator in like a really bring in the church kind of sense. He's really good at bringing out like references to from like that can be applicable to particular communities that would get certain things. But I find him sometimes a little too academic, and I'm like, let's bring it down enough. Let's bring it down.
Yeah, I do think that sometimes, especially now that you're in a political context, making all those allusions to poets and jazz musicians and writers and what have you can come off a little bit like a deflection from a question about policy that's more specific and grounded.
Yeah.
And I know that he's just announced, and so I don't know, like maybe he hasn't gotten much in the way of his policy platform written yet, and so I'll give him like a little bit of latitude on that for now. But he needs to, and I'll say this to RFK, this is true of RFK Jr. too. They're both doing this thing where they get questions that they clearly can't answer, and they'll say, well, thank you for bringing that up. I'll look into that. I'll take that under advisement. And people, especially with RFK, are treating that like this is like a really benevolent, really a sign of openness, a sign that he's a great listener, a sign that he's really in touch with the people. And I'm like, that can fly a few times. Or it can fly if you're talking about something really esoteric that you wouldn't expect even a presidential campaign to necessarily have an opinion on, like UFOs, okay? But if you get a question about healthcare, if you get a question about some of these Elon Musk like privacy issues, like I remember in that last Breaking Points interview, RFK Jr. didn't seem to be aware of any of the inconsistencies of Elon Musk's moderation choices. Mm-hmm. And I'm just saying, like, maybe if you're not following something so closely, don't refer to Elon Musk as a genius. That's all I'm saying. You open yourself, like, if you make a very strong statement about something, then I would hope that you were informed. And then the excuse that, like, oh, I need to look more into that, it starts to feel like, well, if you're willing to commit so strongly to this issue without knowing what you're talking about, why should I have confidence in any of the other things that you've committed to? How do I know that you've actually vetted these other issue areas? So I think sooner rather than later, Cornel West is going to have to change his rhetorical approach and start being a little more succinct and to the point when he's answering policy questions.
100% agree. I 100% agree. I watched him on Laura's Room interview, and I was like, what I loved was that he was keeping his critique as part of his message of like the system, right? Like that's so important. Mm-hmm. But we gotta find you got 30 seconds, bro, to like answer that. You know what I mean? Like we gotta find a way to make it so it's like you can say all that, fewer sentences. Yeah. And then land, what are you gonna do for the people? Like land where the direction you're heading in,
100%. So you watched the Laura Ingraham's interview, which means you saw the end of that interview.
I kind of vaguely remember the end of it.
I thought that's maybe what you were calling to ask me about. He got a question at the end of that interview, which let's all maybe just listen to it, huh?
Okay. Oh, is it about trans stuff? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
Wow.
I know. Okay, you don't have to weigh in on it, Rika. I can go to somebody else and we can talk about it with somebody else. Because it's a moment that some other people, I think, are going to also have to address. And so we might as well just figure out, as a community here in this safe space, what we want to do about it. Okay. All right. Okay, here we go. Wait a minute.
Do you think there are ways for the left-wing populists and the right-wing or conservative populists?
Theological realignment of them still operating down.
You know what I don't know your view on, Cornel, is your view on trans athletes in women's sports, because you are a big champion of women. We disagree on the abortion issue, but you are a big champion of women, right, and I appreciate that. I was a female athlete my day, ages ago. But what about that? Yes. Do you think trans men who are biological men should be in the Wimbledon finals?
I am committed to the dignity of precious trans folk because they're so vulnerable, and I just hate
women
to see them
don't have a shot then
and attacked. No, okay. but I'm also willing to learn and listen in the argument, because I think it depends on case to case and context to context. I just want to make sure that the most vulnerable are never ever.
Women are vulnerable. Yeah, women are vulnerable. If they're competing against men in most sports. All right, Dr. West, come back. It's great to have.
But that's another issue. But
we'll come back soon.
Thank you so much, though.
Great to see you as always. All right, you take care. Work together.
Hey. Oh, goodness knows, John Hannity, no. Bad. Sit down. All right, Rika, what did you make of that exchange?
I mean, I think it goes back to kind of your point earlier, like, you kind of have to be clear about what your stance is on this stuff.
Do you think he was clear?
No, I mean, I think he was clear, but I don't think he was taking a stance, right? He was clear that he was like, I want to straddle some things here, and I want to don't want to step in dog shit with trans people. That's what I was getting.
Is that a place that one can occupy for very long?
No. I don't think it is, but I also think like I'm oh my God.
I'm sorry, Rika. I'm so sorry.
I don't care. I don't care. I think that it's like it's I just don't care. I'm like one of those people that is like, oh, let's get Cornell and we'll talk about it. Like that's kind of how I feel about it. But I'm because what I really wanted to was more of the two episodes we had with around police abolition and with Cop City. Like you had the interview. I'm blinking on his name. The black scholar.
Oh, Cedric Johnson.
Yeah, Cedric Johnson. And then you had Cop City that followed that, right? And I thought it was a beautiful pairing, like in terms of the show lineup, one after the other. But a couple of things. One, I am so thankful you like aired that panel because around Cop City, because the level of state repression that we're seeing and is just like insane, and I don't think people know about that.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that, and it also kind of reminded me of a bunch of things that happened around all of the protests that erupted in Minneapolis when I was there, around the various murders that happened with police, and just how people would go after them and after the organizers and activists around that stuff. And I think it's so incumbent upon us as anyone who's on the left or anyone who's an organizer and activist to be paying attention to that kind of stuff, just as like we should be paying attention to the Glacier decision that came down from the Supreme Court around strikes, right? Like anything that's like criminalizing our ability to protest and resist and giving them license means that we have to start thinking even more critically about how we're going to be our tactics, right? And what we're going to do in the face of that kind of violence, right? Because we have to be prepared for that. We have to be ready to maybe do things that are going to like potentially, I'm not advocating for a full-out war. Like,
oh, no, of course not.
No, I'm not. But I'm just saying like, the type of response that we're going to need to support people to prevent them from getting, thrown in prison is just like for simply protesting is going to be even bigger. Like we had to mobilize so many people so often who got arrested for civil disobedience actions just to prevent them from getting like, charged with like felonies, and it's just like it's insane. And I hats off to all the people that are doing that work. I just think that's so important. But on a related note to that, I don't understand how a leftist can sit here. I can understand you can theoretically make an argument to support the maintenance of police, but I don't understand how you can consider yourself a leftist and still support police. I just don't. I don't get it. And I'm wondering if you can help shed some light on that.
I don't know either, Rika. That's not my circus, not my monkeys or whatever.
Okay.
I honestly don't. Look, so obviously there's this weird thing that's happening with the section of the left. I mean, it feels like it's kind of died down a little bit, honestly, since the whole Schmana-Smarshmarian situation over at TYT. But there was a number of commentators, many of whom I like a great deal, like Li Fong and others, who have leaned into a narrative that says the left is indifferent to the harms that criminals, violent people and the like impose on communities, disproportionately Black and brown communities are the victims of crime. It is, in fact, anti-left to not be interested in the public safety for those individuals. There's a lot of centering of immigrants. It's like identity politics doesn't matter until we're talking about an immigrant shop that gets vandalized, which somehow is different. It's like worse when an immigrant shop gets vandalized versus a native born American shop. But I'm going to put that to the side for a second. I'm just pointing out aspects, like themes of the narrative that I've observed.
Yeah, no, that was the same discourse that erupted after in Minneapolis around the George Floyd uprising that happened in the streets. It was clear what they were trying to do. I often hear too, paired with that rhetoric of like, well, Black communities actually want police. They actually do want that, and it's like, I from my experience in Minneapolis, when polled whether or not folks wanted police, the majority of people in Minneapolis did not want police. There were, pockets where it was like present, but the majority of people said no. But you get people that will often say they want police because they want to feel protected. That's the only thing that they believe is out there, even though it's a compromise, right? Like, or they could potentially compromise their own safety.
Yes, it accepts the framing that police are the only path to ending crime and being safe. And that was my fight, obviously, with Cedric Johnson as well. It's like, I'm a little frustrated at this point, the year of our Lord, 2023, that we're still having debates about defund, that pretend like the defund movement is just like, okay, I don't care about crime, like police are an innate evil, let's get rid of them tomorrow, as opposed to saying all of the millions of dollars, including like 50% of the LA City budget that we spend on the police, could just be spending on giving people money, making it so they're not poor and that they don't turn to crime, and spending, $50,000 a year to send somebody to college instead of just send somebody to jail.
Yes, Bree, it was so. When he said like that, it also like came from like outside, or I think he made a comment about how it's not really from these communities that are making. It's like bullshit. Like this was like also this isn't like some intellectual exercise that upper middle class bourgeois people are enacting, or organizing around. Like the whole abolitionist movement in Minneapolis was born out of like years of organizing, like years of conversations in community. It didn't just like happen, but it frustrates me when you have quote unquote leftist scholars who are like critiquing that.
It's like you should just know. Like, we can have a debate about how quickly one can defund the police. How long is it going to take? What kind of reductions in crime do we need to see to measure if this is working and that we can credibly and like safely roll back the police? What is the language of defund the police? Even if I agree with the underlying principle, is that language helpful? Like, these are debates that I can entertain.
Yes.
But like, my question back to folks, like, what if I just went running? What if I just said, okay, how much of the LA police budget, LA City budget should be for the police? Because it's already 50%. Do you want it to be 60%, 70%, 80%? How many SWAT teams do we need so that we can do things like break down the front door of folks in Atlanta who are raising bail funds for their colleagues that have been improperly arrested for attending a concert?
Right. Exactly.
What are the goals? How about instead of you getting me to explain defund to you, you explain to me what the tangible benefits of Cop City are going to be in terms of making Atlanta or anywhere else in America a safer place with less crime. How is that going to diminish crime? Because I can point to you city after city after city and study after study after study that shows zero correlation between the funding and size of the police department and reductions in crime.
That's right.
So I don't have to prove anything to you about defund. You have to prove to me why you want to keep throwing money at the status quo when it's so obviously not working.
Yes. And so to that point, I feel like a lot of times on riots, and I'm curious about your maybe insider perspective, I feel like with some of these topics, perhaps even some of the trans topics included, I feel like the framing has already been set up.
Yes.
Right? And so then you're doing 1,000 times work trying to excavate us out of that framing to like get us in a different position to have a different conversation. There's so many assumptions that I feel like I'm rising with some of the issues that get brought forward are just like taken for granted, laid as the foundation, and then it just feels like it's like a spiral down. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like I certainly do feel that way.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it's I don't want to say it's not purposeful. I mean, so here, so for example, we covered today that young woman swimmer, Grace, I always forget her name, who once swam against Leah Thomas and has very strong feelings about it, was testifying before that hearing that they had today on trans women in sports. So naturally, we're going to cover that because our audience loves those stories.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Immediately, this is an issue because this is one little tiny small corner of what's going on with trans activism today. And the overwhelming story should be the hundreds of laws that are being passed to substantively restrict the rights of trans people, including adults, from dressing in the way they want to occupying public spaces where they want to doing a drag show, for people who are not trans to wear clothes of whatever gender they want in a theatrical way or any other kind of way they want.
Yeah.
And it's a huge civil liberties issue and a civil rights issue.
Right.
But the story is that this hearing happened on the Hill, and I think that conservatives are very astute, recognizing, and we had a pollster from, I think, Gallup or something on a week or two ago, who was talking about this new poll that showed a majority of Americans are a thumbs down on the idea of trans women in cis women's sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so Republicans know that. They know that they lost on the gay marriage thing. They've realized that everybody has too many gay friends, gay kids, gay hairstylists, gay actors that they love, and they got to drop that one. And so they've moved on to an issue where they're actually the public is with them. And but the only reason that I'm interested in this issue is because it's obviously the wedge that they've chosen, and they're going to beat that horse until it's dead. And they will take down all of the other substantive trans issues with it because there's no oxygen left in the conversation for anything else, as long as we're still fighting like that is a nexus of debate.
Right.
And we watched that hearing. I don't know if you watched it.
I didn't. No.
But there was a black woman. So Gaines, the summer talks and she says her piece. And then they have this Democratic black woman giving a rejoinder. And she was basically like, she was asked, do you think that it's fair for, a trans woman to play and be in Wimbledon or whatever? And she kind of equivocated, sort of like Cornella. And was like, well, what I would answer is that there are all these men who think that they could beat Serena Williams, but obviously they can't. And then Gaines, the swimmer woman, goes, well, in fact, Serena or Venus or both of them were beat by the 200th and whatever ranked male tennis player. So no, not every man can obviously beat Serena and Venus, but men who are very far from the top of their field can beat the top of the person in the women's field. And the Democratic woman was just like really getting beaten up because she was clearly struggling to make an argument. Like Cornella, she obviously wanted to say things that protected the integrity, the dignity, the rights of trans people. But in this weird issue area, it was a tough fight for her. And I don't know any way to get around that particular framing and get away from this issue, except for one, picking segments that are literally about the other laws. Yeah. But as long as these news items keep coming up about trans women in sports, they're going to occupy a lot of oxygen if that's a fight that keeps getting litigated. I just don't know any way around it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, to me, I don't think it's I don't know. I guess there's a both and here. It's not that the issue is not. I retract what I said earlier. I do care about the issue, folks. I just don't talk about it.
Well, no one wants to talk about it because it's tough for us. Well, let's just be honest. You don't think it's tough?
I don't.
Okay.
I think it's simple. I think what's tough is that people are trying to do a lot of things in the conversation, like what you're saying.
Okay, so what do you think? You think there's an easy answer for this, for the last?
No. Hold on. I didn't say there wasn't an easy.
Okay.
I said the conversation's not tough for me because I can engage in it, but like the answer is, and we've hashed this out all of this.
Yeah.
But like I feel like the answers are complex and nuanced and aren't going to favor everybody. But the problem is that everyone's trying to make like ideological arguments, like ushering forward ideological positions, dominance in the argument, right? So like anytime anything trans comes up and the right referring to as transgenderism and gender ideology, it's like fuckers, gender ideology is gender. That's gender.
Yeah.
Idiot. Like you fucking want.
Gravity ideology.
Yeah. Or like, transgenderism. Like there's not a fucking ism with being trans, dipshit. Like that's what I want to say sometimes. I'm just like, there's no ism. Like,
and the swimmer woman, by the way, like, so she was making, I think, arguments that were difficult to respond to, but then she was asking another follow-up question and just kept saying she misgendered people. She was like, there's a man in the locker room. Like she was being clearly bigoted, right? Okay, she was clearly saying things not because she was genuinely invested in whether cis women can compete, fairly in sports, but whether or not she personally just clearly had an antipathy for trans people. And that's what I said. I was like, look, while there may be an argument about what to do about people who have certain kind of the advantages of having gone through male puberty in women's sports, there is no argument that what she's saying here is bigotry, and she's completely undermining whatever argument may exist in this other realm, because she clearly just has a problem with trans people. And that's why we can't have this conversation. So I can say that in the context of the clip, but that doesn't make the first half of it go away for a lot of people,
Yeah. And I just like, I don't know. Personally, I don't engage like in a lot of conversations with people who are so adamantly opposed to trans people living in this world and existing in this world that I, have to engage with this type of rhetoric and discourse that often anymore, to be honest. And so it's like I just like, I don't really know. I personally also like don't know how I would completely engage with someone who's so hell bent on, dismissing trans people and referring to them outside of their pronouns, etc. Right? Like I just don't. But what I will say is like the reason why I think this conversation is difficult is because there's like steps I think that we have to go back to in a larger public conversation around gender, period, right? And it's one that is like not necessarily related to sex. I think we can have a meaningful distinction that there is meaningful biological sex differences across blah, 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 blah. But that's not what we're talking about when we're talking about gender. And for whatever reason, the right wants to continuously collapse all those things together.
I think that's a really important point. And the reason why the transport issue, in quotation marks, is such an issue and so galvanizing for people, because it is in fact about sex and not gender.
Exactly. So what I'm trying to get at though, Bree, is like, so everyone who's an ally and trans who's invested in this issue and who has like really, really worked up about it and perhaps these other some centers like triggered all the fucking time, whatever, right? Like there is this desire to want to like engage in the cultural conversations that need to happen before that, right? And it's not the space or the place. There's like a frustration, right, that happens because now you're in a political war zone rhetorically. You know what I mean?
I get it. I mean, I do think there's a world where you do a version of, I respect trans people. I want trans people to have full rights under the law. Right now, there are conservatives across the country who are trying really hard and fighting really hard to make that not the case, and who are undermining their so-called libertarian states' rights, whatever ideals, are trying to get between kids, families, adults, and their doctors, and the decisions that are being made in the privacy of their homes. And we have to stand against that. Now, on this marginal issue on the side about sports, I think that's being focused on disproportionately for political ends. And we can talk about that. But I wonder if you can affirm for me, Lori Ingrams, or affirm to me, whoever you're talking to, that you share my concerns about the civil rights and interests of members of our trans community.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think, I guess, what am I trying to say here? I think there is something baked into the conversation with conservatives about gender and sex categories that is so normative, right? That makes it very, very difficult to, in good faith, engage with other conversations, because the whole premise of that it's so it's rooted in a mythology about gender, right? Period. And it's like there's no desire to actually entertain that. It's just like, oh, you're just crazy, you're just making this shit up. Oh, and it's like I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go. I want to demand civil rights for everybody, period, point blank, and you should too. But then when you come down to like this practical application, you're just like going to be so defiant and like push people away from doing so. And it's just like, I don't know. I guess I'm not really 100% invested in those conversations in a way that like where I'm like literally going toe to toe with someone who is adamantly representing the other side in this horrible way. I do think that when I have conversations with people who do have questions, who are genuinely curious, right? I always start from a place of like actually talking about their experience with gender, not even mine, right? Like talking about, well, how did you feel about constantly like with the social expectations and norms of this, that, the other, right? Did that feel good? Right? You know what I mean? Like we talk about that stuff and that moves people on the ground. But when we're talking about a political agenda and radio waves and like, messages like that, man, I mean, good luck. Good fucking luck, y'all.
It's tough out here. I'm sure that's not the last time that a liberal, left-leaning presidential candidate is going to get a kind of a question like that. And, we'll see how it keeps playing out. But I won't force you to keep talking about this tough subject, Rika. I'm sorry. I don't mean to keep doing this to you.
It's okay. It makes sense. It makes sense to, some degree to come through. Also, when I'm not on a lot like we have them. But I just wanted to say before I go and before we move on that I thoroughly appreciate anytime there's highlights or attention brought to people who are doing really good organizing work or activism that we don't get in the mainstream, or that are facing real issues on the ground, even on your podcast, I think is a net win for us, the movement. So please keep doing that.
All right. Will do. Thank you, Rika. I appreciate you.
Yeah, likewise.
Keep the faith. I don't know what's going on there, Mike. Keep the faith. Allende. Oh, wait. Let me just check the YouTube, folks. Hey, welcome back, Bree. Thanks, Jay Jackson. Much appreciated. Allende, you're up. What's on your mind tonight?
Hi. Long time no see.
Yeah, for sure. What have you been up to? What are you thinking about?
What I've been up to? I've been in the gym.
Okay, brag.
It's become obsessive, and it's like to the point where there's this like meme where it's like gym bros like the gym is better than a therapist, and like I kind of scoffed at it before, but high key I'm the happiest I've ever been.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Like, yeah. So yeah. Anyways, moving on. So one thing I wanted to say, and I've always wanted to say this to you, is I feel like I feel your. I might be doing something, but I feel like I feel your pain when it comes to, right? Maybe not now because you have it braids, but when you wear your hair out, every time I see you, your hair is immaculate. Single day. Every single day. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, either one of those black people who just wakes up and like it's just so, the natural hair is just so easy to use. Or I just feel like you have a breakdown like every other day before you have to rush to the rising set and get it all done? It's one of the two.
It's not immaculate. I was just talking on the phone with my aunt last night, like, because I have to take these braids out this weekend, and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm dreading it because it's about to be peak humidity in Washington D.C. My hair is so responsive to humidity that I joke. I like to say that someone could sneeze on the other side of a room, and it will completely cause my braid out or twist out to revert. I'm like, how am I going to get, like, I started walking home now to close my rings because exercise, you're not the only one. And it's like, I'm going to be walking home from work in the sweltering, humid heat and whatever. What am I going to do? Redo my twist out every single night? Like, that's not good for your hair. And I was like, Aunt Candy, like, what's the deal? Like, am I going to have to become a wig girly? Like, what should I get into? Like, help me, because she's good at hair. So I appreciate you saying that, but half the times, if you see me with a slick bun, if you see me with my hair parted down the middle, and it's slicked down on the sides, that's me panicking. And that if I were to turn the back of my head to the camera, you would see a very messy scrunchie holding it all together that I know I don't have to care that much about because the back of my head never shows.
Well, I mean, I don't think we notice. I don't think the audience notices. I think we always think you have amazing hair. But
well, I appreciate you, Ayende, for sure.
But so one thing, so more seriously, I guess, or on politics topic, one like what I've really been thinking about is RFK recently, and usually like I feel like I'm a very open-minded person, and like I've really just been trying to evaluate him. Even though I went into this and he like married me into the idiot, like I really could not believe that there was going to be someone like significantly ahead of Marianne Williamson, like popping into the primary, like that isn't named Joe Biden. I was floored by RFK being a thing, right? And so like I'm trying to like see like what the value is in this person, like really valuing all their ideas or whatever, like at face value, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt or whatever. And when I tell you like I've been trying, but when dude like was talking about Wi-Fi giving you cancer on Joe Rogan, I was really like I'm trying my best. I'm really trying my best, but like I don't know how like it's just like a tall ask at this point. So like the vaccine stuff aside, right? Like I was like I'm giving the benefit of that whatever. Like okay, maybe like I don't know what to think. Maybe I've been brainwashed as well about vaccines, yada yada, right? But when he moved on to the Wi-Fi thing, you're asking a lot from me, like to speak aside. You're asking a lot.
I did not want to have to do this. This is about to be the end of me right here. I hope you appreciate how honest and open and into it I'm willing to get with you, because I'm about to be canceled over this. I am now sharing on my screen. is because like there's a lot of stuff in our environment that's relatively untested that has potential to cause harm. So like it sounds kooky. I know it sounds kooky, and I'm not saying there's any definitive proof of anything, but there's enough stuff out there that people are concerned about that there have been regulations in place in the EU.
You see all of this, right? Is exactly why someone needs to debate RFK. Because me as an uneducated person, someone who doesn't spend a lot of time looking at these things, right? Like just me listening to RFK on face value, like I can't like if you're a person who grows up in the mainstream, right, and you're hearing RFK say the things that he does, and no one is willing to go point by point, with evidence or whatever, actually evaluating what he's saying, right? I have to put faith in RFK at some point, or unless I'm doing my own research, which I should do, but I have to stack up all the things this guy is telling me and what he's asking me to believe or following him on, and take the leap to him. Where I shouldn't have to do that. There should be these actual doctor people, actual crazy people, I don't know, who go through and actually debate him on points. That way, I can actually hear someone else who's not him telling me these things like you are just not. Because you've changed how I saw that entire interview. You've gotten me, okay, maybe I need to.
Okay, but so that's scary, right? Because I also don't know what I'm talking about. This is the thing with the scientist. It's I don't want to have to be the scientist because I could be wrong and making mistakes about stuff. I'm fully humble about that. But I also am really this is what happened with COVID. Everyone was told dogmatically all this stuff could never be true. It can never be lab leak theory. That's a crazy thing. Crazy people say. That guy, my ex-boyfriend from 5 years ago's friend, apparently his big thing is that he's really anti-lab leak. And that's how he's been on the internet. So there goes his credibility as well. But we were told so much stuff about there's masking and then don't mask and then we're saving the mask for PPE and then we're, masks don't work and now they do. And no one's talking about the high quality masks, which absolutely do work and you should be wearing them. But we're at a place now where we don't know who to listen to or what to understand. And so of course everyone's independently going to their, PubMed journals and trying to figure out stuff for their own. And here's the thing, this people are well, there's no definitive proof that the Wi-Fi causes problems. Well, no shit, Sherlock. They were telling us there was no definitive proof for years that cigarettes cause cancer, but I think most people would be well, all things being equal, I'll just step away from that and take some precautions in the interim until they figure it out. You know what I mean? So, if RFK Jr. saying, I want to run for president because I think there should be more research in these issue areas, that feels like a good thing to a lot of people. Not because there is definitive proof, but because there is enough evidence to suggest there could be a problem such that we want definitive proof. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, the second part to my RFK hesitancy, really manifesting now, is he didn't seem to put any thought into what he believes the economic structure of the United States should be. All these different policies. The fact that Saagar had asking questions where do you think the minimum wage should be and no answer. Don't you think before you run for president that you should at least have that in your you should have answered that question for yourself. Maybe you don't have every question answered, but there's every time you ask about economics, I default to the free market, right? In which I don't want to. I feel I'm the market socialist guy. You know what I mean? Whenever I talk to my friends about this stuff, I'm okay, you can have a market and still be for the people or whatever, right? So I'm not discounting that, but all of these other questions he doesn't seem to have answers. And my problem is usually not with the answer, right? So when we're discussing health, things we should do about healthcare, public option versus single payer versus full on Medicare for all, right? It's never usually I have a great objection to the idea of a public option, right? If I don't actually think you want the public option that bad, you know what I mean? That's usually my thing, because for all this talk about what I will have ingrained in my mind for the rest of my life is that we had all this talk from Joe Biden and then Pete and Kamala about like Medicare for all, we want it done, and we get nothing, right? So that means you didn't actually care about it to begin with. So it's not like it's the lack of commitment, the lack of like I've thought about this and like this is my answer, less so less so what the actual answer is. Like it gives me this feeling that he's not serious about like fundamental things that like I want from my presidential candidate to put all my chips in, to donate my money towards yada yada.
Yeah. I personally am frustrated by a lack of what feels like a structural critique, because if there's a new issue that comes up and you have a structural analysis, then you have the tools to come to the right conclusion, even if it's a new subject. And I have concerns about RFK Jr. for that reason. And also, it wasn't just the Israel thing in the vacuum. It was saying something that felt authentic and true, a defense of Roger Waters, followed up by a complete 180 after you talk to Rabbi Shmuley. And it's like, also, are you too easily influenced because you don't have an ideological framework, a historical understanding, something deeper than just knowing what's popular on Twitter? And maybe that's not fair. But that is a concern of mine as I watch him kind of be inconsistent on some of these things, or admit to being ignorant about some of these things. And like the healthcare issue is one too. It's like, well, universal healthcare is hard. Well, when Bernie explained it, he said there's a program that we have right now called Medicare. It's one of the most popular and most efficient programs that we have in the United States of America. Medicare for all works thusly. In the first year, we expanded the Medicare age down to 55. Second year, we put it down to 45. First year down to 55 plus everyone under 18. Second year down to 45 plus everybody under 18. Third year down to 35 and everybody under 18. And then the last year, everybody is included. That didn't seem that complicated to me.
Mm-hmm.
You obviously have to pay for the growth in infrastructure and the inclusion of things that aren't currently included in Medicare, like hearing, vision, and dental. But you do that, yes, their taxes are going to go up, but they're going to go up less than the premiums that you're paying now. And you always get health care no matter what, even if you skip your payments because there is no payment. That's the way the new system works. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom. Didn't that suddenly go from seeming like something that was a pipe dream to something that could happen in 4 years?
Yeah.
And so when people like RFK Jr. say, well, it seems hard, to me it's like, well, maybe because you don't really understand what the plan is. And also, if you think that seems hard, wait until you try to cut the military budget. Like that's why I asked him the question the way I did. I'm like, you literally say that the deep state killed your family members because they objected to the war in Vietnam. And now you're sitting here telling me that you think it's going to be easier to kill the military-industrial complex, knowing that happened or believing that happened, than to get universal health care, which fully is a thing in all these other peer countries around the world, in a way that, ending imperialism isn't a thing that's really happened in those countries.
And like I just had a thought, right? Like it's giving Obama a little bit. Like I feel like the amount of like, how a lot of people are thinking or like saying like, RFK, he could be this like change candidate, like he's all about like, getting rid of the corruptness of big pharma and like ending the war, but because there's like no structural thing there, it doesn't seem to be very much commitment to like how you're actually gonna, change these things. Like it feels like if at all it's possible to become president at the end of the day. Like it's gonna be like this 180 where, well, not necessarily 180, but like none of the stuff is really gonna get changed fundamentally, and then we're gonna be in a position where this person didn't make all like this person was a moderate, quote unquote moderate centrist all along that wasn't gonna do much, and we bamboozled ourselves into thinking they were gonna do something about it, and they were never gonna do it all along.
Yeah, look, I don't want to overstate things. I think he has sincere commitments, many of which I agree with, and I think it would be good for him to try. I think his critique of the capture of the administrative state and the revolving door of politics and all of that stuff is right and good. Now, we did hear Trump say similar things, and then he got into office and put all the same, schmucks back in there. Obama said, rah, recession bad, banks bad, and then hired all those SOBs and put them right back in those positions. So, talk is cheap. But based on talk, which is all we have at this stage, yeah, who knows? I don't want to sit here and say he's definitely going to betray us in every way because I can't know that. But what Chris Hedges said in the last episode was, what we do know, why we did trust Bernie and why he does trust Cornel West is because we've seen decades of a record that suggests that if this is a grift, this is a long game since they've been playing since the cradle, that they've been playing forever. And so that maybe you can trust it. And that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do it, but it means that you have some confidence that they're going to try.
Mm-hmm. Last thing before I go, I have a question, just evaluate this idea real quick. I was thinking, is it possible that you could, in the same way that on a ballot, you have, the party that someone comes from, you could have, some sort of signifier of how they're funded on a ballot legally. So, a publicly funded candidate would have, two next to their name. Mm-hmm. A, corporate funded candidate would have a T next to their name. Do you... On face value, what do you think when you hear that idea?
That's interesting. I kind of love it. I don't think it'll happen in a million years, but part of my issue with Andrew Yang and the Forward Party is that I would like for someone to know that that's the case because they know that anybody who runs under a certain party's banner is publicly funded. I would like it if the Forward Party understood that as part of its mission of being different from the duopoly is required to reject corporate financing. But she doesn't. Right.
It seems legally possible to you, right?
Legally plausible? I have no idea. I'm not an election lawyer.
Yeah, okay. All right.
But I think that a party should be able to brand itself. Certainly can brand itself that way, the way that Bernie branded himself as not taking corporate money, and it incentivized people to give him dollars and to trust him. And it is very frustrating to me that Forward doesn't see the advantages of that. And I asked again in this interview that people can choose not to talk about, but in this interview, I asked him very specifically a series of pointed questions about his willingness to give up corporate money. And he said, for all intents and purposes, I don't want to bring a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bree.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for calling in, A&A. Keep the faith. All right, I'm going to go. I saw someone in the chat on the internet be like, this is my first time calling in. I really hope I get called on. But your name online and your name in the chat are different. So to the extent you wanted me to show you favoritism and that I was inclined to do so, I literally cannot. So I'm going to go to Jane with the puppy dog avatar. What's on your mind? Are you with me, Jane? Also, nobody has said anything about my new neon light, and I'm hurt. While Jane's figuring out her unmute button, I'm going to read some comments off the screen. Beffer Luger, would a trans volunteer for Dr. West doing the kind of comms you suggested be a game changer? How? I don't know that it's up to anybody, cis or trans, to come up with a message. I think it's on the trans community to decide, what is going to be kind of the line item, what's the advocacy, how are you going to handle this sports issue? Is it subsuming all the other issues? Is it something that's worth fighting for? Are you going to distinguish between what happens at the peewee level or the pre-competitive level versus post-competitive level? Is the resolution to have, yes, bifurcated sports, but not on the basis of sex per se? Say cis women, because we're so weak, have one category and everybody else can be in the other category. I don't know, but I'm not in the position to make recommendations to anybody. All I'll say is that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and it's sucking up a lot of oxygen from issues that I think are really important in terms of trans advocacy. Stacy Shellman, thank you, says, I've never had the nerve to join in any call-in. I'm in the queue now. You're so relatable. I'm going to take a chance. Yes, Stacy, I'd seen your comment. I hope you do keep trying. It looks like whomever I called them before, either purposefully or accidentally, yeeted themselves from the chat. So I'm going to go to Kate. What's on your mind tonight, Kate?
Am I there?
You are here, loud and clear.
Oh, good. It's nice to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Indeed, indeed. What's on your mind tonight?
Well, I wanted to go back to, we're talking about the Wi-Fi, the vaccine, and I think I'm older. My kids were all vaccinated. My kids are older than you are. And I've never been anti-vax, but you can't have these conversations at all. Mm-hmm. You're not able to tease out the nuances. So like what you said, when you think Wi-Fi, aluminum foil caps and things. Mm-hmm. Actually, if you look at the whole conversation, there are some really important things that we should be talking about. They may not be as overblown as some people say they are. And the same with vaccines. I am pro-vax, but the schedule for when my kids had vaccines in the 80s is completely different now. The amount of I don't think I have I can't remember, but like 16 shots to something like 57 now. And and then there's another the antigens and different things. So I can't pull up all the information, but in my mind, you've got these little immature immune systems, and so whether or not they should have these vaccinations is less the point. And should they have them
spaced out?
Yeah, and even more spaced out, or do they even need them at all? I mean, are some of these things so preventative that it's not that the chances of them actually having that issue is minimum. But you can't have the conversation. So that's been the hard part for me, because get vaccines, but can't we talk about how So on one hand, people are very able to look at the pharmaceutical industry and go, they're probably messing with us, and they create medicines to keep us sick. They actually have news things where they state that, it's not a good it's not a good business model to actually cure some of these diseases. Better to keep people sick. So we get that, and we can say that, some of the medications, some of the things they're doing are probably not really in our best interest, but when it comes to vaccines, we can't see that some of this might be have a monetary backing to it, a kind of a money idea, and that maybe we don't need all of these, but they like that we're divided this way, and that we have these crazy conversations, so that we don't ask some of the the more nuanced questions.
Yeah, there was a case, I've talked about it before, where plaintiffs brought suit over Lipitor. I'm sure you're familiar, because pretty much every American over 40 is prescribed Lipitor.
Not this one.
Well, good for you. Good for you. It's a statin. It's a drug that keeps your cholesterol down for those who are not yet in that age frame. And the point of this case, there's something called a QI/TAM action, where you can file on behalf of the government if the government declines to take up something that's in its own interest. And so plaintiffs have brought a QI/TAM action on behalf of the government, arguing that the government was being overbilled for prescribing Lipitor, which it prescribed millions and millions and millions of dollars worth, and was paid out by Medicare and Medicaid every year in huge amounts. The government paid for this. And that the reason that doctors were overprescribing it is because Pfizer, who manufactures the drug, was misrepresenting the difference between the actual cholesterol levels at which it's medically indicated, and which is called a cut point, and this other metric that was called a guideline. And when they were marketing the materials to doctors, they were really stressing guidelines and blurring the distinction between the two things. So people who had cholesterol levels that were much lower than the cut points, but were where the guidelines were, were getting prescribed Lipitor, even though maybe they didn't actually have high cholesterol yet, and maybe they should have just been told to start jogging, start doing a walk after dinner or whatever.
Change your diet.
Exactly. And so while you might think that, let's say, a conservative judge would be really into this case because it's basically saying there's all this government fraud and waste, government paying for drugs to a pharmaceutical company that are not really owed, that wasn't my experience with this case. And it was crazy because normally a lot of these cases fail because you have to prove that the doctor was but for the misrepresentation of the pharmaceutical industry wouldn't have prescribed the drug. And you have to get a doctor on the record that's like willing to say that, and that's a little bit of an ego thing. But these plaintiffs had done a good job in finding doctors that say, well, they flew me out to Hawaii and they told me this, that, and the other, and I was genuinely confused. And now that I realize what the deal is, yes, I would not have prescribed this medication. So at least at this pleading stage, it seemed to me that this was a good case that should go on to the next stage, but that did not happen. So when I see this kind of thing happening, and when I see the court's rationale being things like, well, doctors know what they're doing. They couldn't be caught up by false advertising. They're doctors. Everyone knows what they're doing. Expertise. I'm on Lipitor. It doesn't hurt me. There's the downsides, the side effects are so minimal and rare. Who cares?
They are not, but yes.
But this is where we are. And so, the vaccine stuff, it's hard. My mother, I don't mean to put her on blast, but she similarly talked about how taking my older brother to the doctor for his 1 year checkup or whenever it is, 2 years, whenever you get the shot, in the early 80s, mid 80s. And she had DPT, a shot in the dark, with her. She was in a master's program in early childhood education at the time, had been reading about this stuff, and had dog-eared a bunch of stuff and just wanted to have a conversation with her gynecologist about it. And says that she was shamed and shouted down. I was like, okay, I wasn't saying I didn't want to vaccinate him. I just wanted to ask you about the vaccine schedule and some of these other concerns. This was my child. And I think that attitude that so many people have encountered with the medical profession is exactly why there's all of this distrust. I'm sorry. There's just all of this distrust. If you don't have the wherewithal to address what are reasonable concerns about new volumes of vaccines, as you put it, a larger amount than have ever been prescribed before, and in closer proximity than ever been prescribed before, that have preservatives in them that are literal toxins. No one's arguing that aluminum and mercury aren't toxins. The argument is that they're in such small quantities that it's okay. But there was enough concern about it that they took the mercury out of all of those vaccines.
Right.
Out of an abundance of caution, they say. Okay, well.
And if you have enough vaccines with just that small amount,
right,
in an infant's immune system, well, you're compromising it. I grew up in the 50s. My dad was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
They do not get nutritional education. They are educated on an ongoing way by the pharmaceutical companies that have the guys who come out. We used to get baby food. I used to have that at my college dorm.
Mm-hmm.
We'd get those for treats and stuff. But they don't have all that kind of knowledge. But back in the 50s, when penicillin came out, any of us, there were 4 of us, we'd get a sniffle, and we were lined up on the couch, and we all got a penicillin shot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 3 of my other 3 siblings are, hardy, but for me, I was kind of like the canary in the mine, and developed, a lot of chronic issues from overuse of antibiotics. They know that now, but back then, and it's just this. I think it's money driven, and they encourage this idea that we can't have these conversations. Like you said, your mom, when she's in there, and the doctors won't have those conversations. They roll their eyes. All my friends, I think, are on one statin or another. And yet, what you were saying, they actually lowered, and I think what you were talking about, guidelines versus, the actual cut point, they've lowered what is, to incredibly low to what your cholesterol is, quote unquote, supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And as people age, actually, you need more cholesterol in your system. And what they're finding is people who keep it artificially too low is that they're starting to have more cancers later on in life.
Mm.
So, I work with herbs, so I'm an herbalist, and so my first approach always is, change your diet. look at nutrition, exercise, maybe add some, food grade herbs to your protocol, and use the medications last. But I'm kind of like, doctors are amazed if I have to go in and I'm not on medication.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, you're kidding, no medication, and I'm healthy, so it's, I'm sorry, that's kind of getting off on it.
No, I'm not. I'm really trying not to like HIPAA violate my mother, but like this is a very common conversation in my household, is all I'll say.
Good. Well, and I mean, before jumping off, I also wanted to say I've just been appalled at the arrows you've been getting, recently. Just, oh my word, people are they're, like you said, they're very, very triggered, and like I said, you're younger than my kids, and I don't let them hear me say this, but I can't. I mean, you are so much more articulate. You're questioning. You are very. One of the things I love is you're always very, very prepared for what you're going to be discussing, and I was frankly really amazed seeing all the kind of people on this divide on the left, and people who would villainize you. I would be thinking that everybody be embracing you because you actually do bring this integrity to these discussions. So my little plug for you. So.
That's very kind of you to say, and I really do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, I'll jump off. I just I haven't had time to watch the Chris Hedges thing yet, and I can't wait because I love him.
Yeah, he's great. It's always such a pleasure to talk to him, and it's a real pleasure talking to you as well, Kate. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yes, and sorry, one more thing. If you can start, I mean, I think class, looking at class but environment too. Putting those two together.
Mm-hmm.
The scientist rebellion, all that kind of group. I'm in the process with my city trying to save a meadow from them developing. So I've been doing that, and in fact, before I came in, I was cleaning out my worm bin. But I would love to see the merge of the two. Not okay, we're on this terrible trajectory climate-wise, but adding how that is, how that with working climate class issues, why that is.
Yeah, Cop City is one of those stories, in fact, where the environmental aspect of it sometimes gets downplayed. And also Jordan Cheriton has been doing a great job with the paper mill story in Kalamazoo. Yeah. Maybe I should have him on and talk about that as well. Yeah.
That'd be great. Okay. All right. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. You too, Kate. Keep the faith.
You too. Bye.
Eric Smith. How are you doing, my old friend?
I am good. How you been?
I've been good. What's on your mind tonight?
Okay, so first, because you mentioned it, because I wasn't watching the YouTube live, so I definitely had to pop onto the YouTube live, check out the lighting, because I'm someone who works in lighting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I've always liked the fact that I can tell that when you started your podcast and started your video, you definitely did research, because I do like some of the tips I can tell that you're using with your lighting. One of the main things, I'm a big fan of like color contrast. So, having a warm light at the key, having a little purple light on the side. And then also
you like my new pink neon light?
I do like that. And also understanding textures, the fact that you have the plant right there, the fact that you have stuff going on in the background.
Some depth of field.
The depth of field. So you have it slightly out of focus. That brings, dimension to it. Because even though I can probably tell that's where you're shooting right now. By adding all of that, you kind of expand the room, make it a little bit bigger. So yeah, kudos.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was moving furniture around at 2:00 in the morning because I have this weird. I've heard it's a little bit of an ADHD thing to want to constantly be moving stuff around your space. There was something in this bookshelf area that's just been bugging me, and I finally got it all together. That's part of why I decided to do this today. But I was feeling so good about my space that I said, let me just set this camera up and do a live stream while my apartment's clean and I've got incentive. But apart from giving me these very well-received compliments, Eric, what is on your mind substantively tonight?
So what was on my mind is I recently watched. I was watching the Crystal and Kyle. So I did. This is one of the first times I did not watch the episode today because I was working and I just didn't have time. But I've been watching a lot of the other episodes, especially about this context of Cornell West winning and the whole conversation now again being brought up about third parties. I was recently watching the Crystal and Kyle show, and they were bringing up a debate about third parties versus, how they wish Cornel West was running the Democratic Party and some of their arguments against, running in the third party, which some I agreed with, or I think maybe not agreed with, but thought that they had a valid point that, obviously, if you're someone who believes in third parties and third parties running, you should want to know, to take those points and understand that they're coming from, there's some substance behind it. And one of the ways that they were always coming back to is this idea of the lesser harm. I mean, he was bringing up the idea of, lesser harm, and they were also bringing up the idea that, with Biden and hiring the what's it called, the NRLB, and the benefits that, Biden being there and who he put in charge of the NLRB, and that being an aspect of why,
it's important to win.
It's important to win and all that. That ideology. And when I was listening to them, and my thing is that what I think they're missing when it comes to the idea of what Biden is doing, and the few times you may quote unquote say he did something good, is that his good is always measured to an extent. I believe the Democratic Party understands, especially after the Hillary Clinton campaign and 2020, that they have to be careful in how, I would say, antagonistic they are to at least the left within that are still within the Democratic Party that still holds true to this duopoly. And I believe that what they're doing, and I believe there's a consciousness to it, is that when Biden puts a person like that in the NLRB, who does do some good things, who has made it easier for unions to formulate, for unions to have an easier run and to get more favorable rulings on that front, i.e. with some of the rulings that they did that favor the Amazon creation of the union, some of the rulings that helped with the Starbucks and all of that. It's done in a measured way because they know that we are willing to allow unions we're willing to allow a certain level of gain, understanding fully and well we are controlling how much gain that unions can receive, or how much, how far progressive we will allow certain policies to happen. And I think that they also fall in the trap that voting for Biden is always going to be or voting for the lesser of two evils is a cyclical argument, because there's always, Republicans are always going to be evil. Republicans, quote unquote, are always going to see in the lesser of two evils when you compare it to the Democrats. And if you're never willing to break that, you're just going to be trapped in the cycle. Because and the reason you're going to be trapped in this cycle is, I think, another thing that they fail to don't bring up is that after 2020, I now see very clearly that what we would consider the true progressives within the Democratic Party, i.e. the Squad and Bernie, are not willing to be the antagonistic force that they need to be to truly push, Nancy Pelosi type and Biden anywhere as far left as we need them to go.
Yeah. So what I will say is that I respect their view, and I understand where they're coming from. They feel as though, look, Bernie got close, and I don't want to misrepresent their views, so you should go and listen to what they've actually said if you haven't already. But my understanding of it is that there's a generalized feeling that there are real tangible things that can be done by a person who wins. It's why we all supported Bernie. We all thought that he could really win. that there are real gains that someone to the left of Biden, even if they aren't as radical as we would like, could achieve, that the more substantive revolution will be easier done under a more left candidate, and that messaging campaigns are a kind of waste of people's time and money, running not to win, but to, just be a part of a conversation isn't something that they are particularly interested in. And that's why they see the value of being in the Democratic Party as more important in terms of having the platform and stuff, as more important than the kind of messaging value of positioning yourself as antithetical to the Democratic Party. And so I think that's a coherent argument. And I think that the reason that I tend not to go with that line of argument is not because I don't think it makes sense, but because I just am I am less confident in the ability to win. I feel as though Bernie was designed in a lab to be the best candidate the left could have. I mean, sure, he could have been younger. He could have been a half Latino, half Black woman, who was also a veteran or something like that. That would make him even, more, I don't know, desirable in the ways that we, for some reason, think people at politicians are desirable.
At the very least, shielded
exactly, from certain accusations. So, sure, but outside of that, in terms of his credentials, in terms of his integrity, in terms of his record, all of that, that was as good as it was going to get. And they still did what they did to him. So, to me, I've just reevaluated my goals. Is my goal just to keep trying to fight one's way into the presidency? Do I think that's even possible? Do I think once you're there, you're able to do much? Well, or is my goal to actually destroy the duopoly, to undermine the credibility of the duopoly, to make it impossible for the Democratic Party to run the way that it has been running with the guarantee of our votes no matter what? And I'm more inclined toward the latter now. I understand why other people aren't. And me personally, I think that there's a way to kind of split the baby. And, it's no skin off my back to say vote for Marianne Williamson in a primary. It's it doesn't cost me anything. I'm not participating in a Green Party primary. That's not a thing. I don't need to be a registered Green. I can stay a registered Democrat and just vote against Biden in the primary and then vote for Cornel West in a general election when what I presume will happens, and the left candidate doesn't make it out of the primary, because that's what they do. But I also, I understand where they're coming from, and I respect the fight just the way I respected Amy Villegas' fight and some of the other candidates that we had on. But I do think that I feel more inspired by the mission of destroying the Democratic Party's ability to operate the way it's been operating.
And I also think one of the things that I disagree with them on is they were talking about how, if Cornel becomes the Green candidate, and if the Green Party has ballot access all 50 states, then it is simple as just vote for Cornel West. Yeah. He has ballot access in all 50 states.
Go West.
Get the electoral huh? What'd I say?
I said go West.
Yeah, go West. If the Green Party has ballot access in all 50 states, then it is simple as saying, vote for Cornel West.
Yeah.
It is that simple. I disagreed with them on that take. That is no. It's at that point in time, even though the Electoral College is stupid, every single state, whoever wins the popular vote in that state gets those Electoral College, and then there's 3 names on it. Just vote, and then if that's the case, if there's 3 names, then one person doesn't have to win a majority of the votes. You just have to win a plurality of the votes. So you should have no problems going around and say, you should vote for West.
I certainly have no problem with it. I don't. So I'm sorry. You're saying that were they saying that if what were they arguing against voting for Dr. West? Are they saying that if Marianne were to win, or just
because they bring up the idea that he's a spoiler candidate? And my thing at that point in time, if he's able to get and I think the Green parties do have ballot access in all 50 states, or at least 48 states, if I'm not mistaken. Then at that point in time, there's no, to me, the way I think of spoiler, that's not a spoiler. If he didn't have, like, if he only had ballot access into half the states, okay, I guess. But if you have ballot access in all 50 states and your name's going to be on the ballot for president of all 50 states.
I mean, me personally, I'm in a place where I don't need him to even have the capacity to win. I don't care about the spoiler argument. He can be registered. He could be on the ballot in only Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada, all the swing states, and I would still say vote your conscience, vote for Cornel West. Because to me, yeah, the point is that you're a spoiler. That's the whole point. The whole power, your whole ability to have, what does Chris had to say? Politics is a game of fear. Your whole ability to make them afraid comes from your ability to spoil the election. That's where all of your leverage lies. So,
because they also brought up that idea, the fact that, they said that, we tried it because, when Jill Stein won and, she got however many percentage she got, they blamed her for losing the election. That's why Hillary Clinton lost and all of that. Even though if you go and you look at the data, most of the Jill Stein votes that she got, even if Jill Stein's name wasn't on it, they said they wouldn't have voted to begin with for either candidate. And my thing is, that to me isn't a reason not to do it, because my whole thing is, you keep doing it until the Democrats learn their lesson. And if they never want to learn their lesson, then they learn their lesson.
Right. And this is what I was saying to, I think, Ajamu. It's like, to me, it's about framing. Like, what we can try to improve upon is to make it harder and harder for the Democrats to put the onus on us and instead put the onus on them. Okay, well, here's, here's a very popular policy. You could have gotten the votes if you would agree to back this policy. You won't. So I'm going to be in the race, running on all the policies that have majority support in America and overwhelming majority of support in the Democratic Party, and that you decline to support. So if people are voting for me and for not you, if I was able to peel these votes away because of my policy platform, why didn't you just adopt that policy platform? It's your fault.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that I think that we're also missing is, when we talk about the NLRB and their ability, that some of the things that they did to help these unions get started, we also don't talk about the fact that these unions are also captured. A lot of these major unions are also captured by a leadership that is so strongly attached to the Democratic Party, even if the rank and file workers aren't. There needs to be, because, as someone, I do work on like a lot of IATSE union films and television shows, and I can tell you from just having conversations with that, the way the union leadership works, particularly in that particular realm, is if they are pretty much, they're no different, in my opinion, from your regular Democratic, elected official. They're going to go lockstep and barrel with the Democratic Party, even though Biden did what he did to the railroad unions, even though Biden barely ever once in a while will come and say, yeah, I support the WGA, but won't go any further than that. Won't go and take a stand and say that, HBO Max is, wrong. Days of Livelock is wrong. These corporations are wrong in what they're doing, and they're hoarding money. They're not going to do that. So I am not as what could I say the word? I am not as confident in this, union revolution that people think is going to happen, because there need to be a revolution within some of the major unions to begin with. Just look at what the nurses union and all these unions that just came out right off the bat and just supported Biden.
Yeah.
So what that tells, I just think about what I would do if I was, if I had the thinking and mindset of like Nancy Pelosi. And if I had the thinking and mindset of Nancy Pelosi, I would never, ever listen to Bernie Sanders. I would never listen to AOC or the Squad at all. Because at the end of the day, what you gonna do? All I gotta say is, Trump comes.
Who gonna check me, boo? That's Nancy Pelosi.
Exactly. Where you at? What you gonna do? All I gotta say, are you gonna let Ron DeSantis be, the president in 2028?
Yeah.
You're gonna let, because I'm gonna tell you right now, I've seen what 4 years of Trump is. It's not, it's annoying, but okay.
Yeah, you heard.
What's another 4 years of Trump? And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And one last thing we're gonna say is, if one of the biggest things that we always talk about is the environment, if we have until 2030 to change anything, I'm telling you right now, they're not. If Biden's in the office, if Trump is in the office, neither of them is going to do anything significant to combat climate change. And right now, the only thing we have is to hope to high heavens that for some reason, maybe someone's, maybe all the scientists, maybe all the environmental scientists, the vast majority of them, all just messed up and, rounded wrong or didn't put a decimal point someplace and they're wrong about climate change. That's the only hope we have.
I actually knew.
Hands down, the most iconic line.
So many phrases.
Housewives across the board.
I actually knew that Sheree was onto something when my then 4-year-old daughter, I asked her to get into the car immediately.
I mean, what did you do? Quoting me. I mean,
I was going to bring it, but it's not the right
everyone. I mean, bye, Felicia. That's me. Okay,
Bye, Felicia.
Don't come for me unless I send for you. Who said that, girl? I'm iconic. I'm iconic phrases.
Oh, not
say it.
I said it on the show.
I want you to say the one.
Oh, she's tapping right now.
God, no, that's me on me.
People gonna check me boo is iconic. No, who's gonna check me boo is it's iconic. People still say it to this day.
I actually.
Yes, they do.
Down.
Yes, they do. Sorry, I thought that was just gonna be a clip of her saying, "Who checked me, boo?" Anyway, I completely agree. Here we are.
And here we are.
Yeah. So to me, the project right at this point is just to, people are going to come for you. People are going to be mad at Cornel West. Blah 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 blah. I independently am responsible for Roe being overturned. Yada yada. Who cares anymore? The point is to increasingly make it look worse for Democrats. And that's why, to me, a third-party run is so important at this moment, because Biden's approval ratings are so low. Majorities of people don't want him to run at all. And so to the extent that something bad happens and the Democrats lose or whatever, people are already primed not to blame the left, but to blame the Democratic Party for ignoring the left. And that's the sweet spot, and that's where we want to be.
Because I think whenever these elections comes around, when anything happens, I think we should always play that clip by what was his name he was an MSNBC host. What was his name?
Was it Lawrence O'Donnell? No.
Lawrence O'Donnell, who says because he said that the reason why the left the Democrats, I'm paraphrasing, the Democrats will never listen to at least the corporate Democrats never listen to the progressive side of the left, is because at the end of the day, they're not willing to withhold their vote. They're going to vote.
Yep.
For whatever they want. Ro Khanna has no power, because at the end of the day, you're going to vote for whatever Nancy Pelosi won and what's his name from Brooklyn died. What's his name again?
Hakeem Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries wants. You're going to do it.
100%.
Yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up. So, for me, I'm pretty much saying that I'll probably vote Marianne Williamson in the New York primary, but definitely vote Cornel West in the general election. I'll probably be telling everyone who I know, vote Cornel West.
Seems like a plan to me. Go West.
Yeah.
If his campaign slogan ends up being Go West, I don't need any actual, credit. I would just like for the history books to acknowledge my contribution to the campaign. All right. Thank you so much for calling in, Eric. You guys, I have some Bernie campaign friends actually in town tonight who I'm supposed to meet at 8:30. So we are going to wrap this conversation. I appreciate all of you. This has been a wonderful reunion of sorts. It's been too long. Take care of yourselves. Keep the faith. Let's have a conversation about moving to locals. I think that's what it has to be. I don't really know anything about locals. Do you know about locals? Should we be local? Stacy, all right, I see that you opted not to call in. She says, I didn't want to jump the queue. Boomer, techno, twit. I'll keep trying. Branson, Patron, Callin. Okay, I keep my eyes out. Hopefully I'll see you next time. And everybody else, I know there's a lot of people still in the queue. You guys are troopers. Maybe next time. All right, take care. Keep the faith.